Hello and welcome. Today we delve into a pivotal turning point of World War II, the Battle of the Bulge, a clash that would forever challenge assumptions about victory, firepower, and the very nature of combat itself. But what if I told you that on December 16th, 1944, as the cold grip of winter settled over the Ardennes, the German Wehrmacht was about to face an enemy equipped with weapons they never expected? Could it be that the Americans, often underestimated, carried a revolutionary firearm, one that would turn the tide in ways no one predicted? How did a simple semi-automatic rifle, described by General Patton as the greatest battle implement ever devised, threaten the might of the German machine gun? Why were the Germans still relying on a century-old bolt-action design, the Karabina 98K, while their enemies were unleashing a new era of rapid-fire assault? And what did the German command fail to grasp about American industrial power, producing thousands of these rifles every single day, seemingly out of nowhere? Was the legend of American firepower a myth or a devastating reality? All of these pieces form a complex puzzle. How did the advent of the semi-automatic rifle change the face of warfare? And what secrets lay behind the American war machine that the Germans so profoundly misunderstood? In this video, we will trace the rise of this technological revolution, unravel the misconceptions that shaped German tactics, and reveal how a simple weapon transformed the battlefield, shattering old strategies and forging a new path to victory. Get ready, because the most explosive truths about the Battle of the Bulge start right now. On the morning of December 16th, in the year of 1944, the clock was precisely 5:30 a.m. when the cold, harsh environment of the Chêne-Eifel Ridge, situated along the border between Belgium and Germany, bore witness to the mounting tensions that would ignite the infamous Battle of the Bulge, an offensive that would stand as the largest undertaken by German forces since the year 1940. The landscape was marked by frozen, cracked earth as soldiers from the German Wehrmacht prepared themselves in silence, their boots crunching upon the icy ground, unaware that within just hours, their assumptions about their adversaries would be shattered forever. Across that unyielding ridge, an estimated 200,000 soldiers from the American forces, then known as the Wehrmacht, stood ready. These soldiers held certain beliefs about the German enemy, convictions rooted in their understanding of warfare and stereotypes. They had been led to believe that the Americans relied more heavily on material wealth, vast supplies of equipment and ammunition, rather than on combat prowess or fighting spirit. It was an idea ingrained with a sense of German superiority, an expectation that American soldiers, ordinary citizen warriors, would be less disciplined, softer in resolve, and less formidable compared to the hardened, experienced German troops. Yet this preconceived notion was destined for a harsh and unforgiving reality check. The coming hours would serve as a brutal lesson, delivered through the raw power of firepower, an arithmetic of destruction that would shatter every misconception held by the German soldiers about their opponents. At the heart of this lesson was a simple yet revolutionary piece of equipment, the American infantryman's rifle, which General George S. Patton, in a letter dated the 26th of January 1945, famously described as the greatest battle implement ever devised. This weapon was the M1 Garand semi-automatic rifle, and its presence on the battlefield would dramatically alter the pattern of combat. Against this formidable armament, the Germans would find their traditional bolt-action rifles, specifically the Karabina 98K, utterly outmatched in both speed and firepower. The typical German soldier of 1944 bore essentially the same weapon his father carried during the First World War. The Karabina 98K, a bolt-action rifle that traced its lineage straight back to the Mauser M 1898, a design that had remained unchanged for over 4 decades. Operated manually after each shot, the bolt of the carbine required a soldier to lift, pull back, push forward, and lock into place, an intricate sequence that, in combat, limited the maximum sustainable rate of fire to roughly 15 aimed rounds per minute, even for an expert rifleman. The German infantry tactics revolved heavily around the machine gun, specifically the MG42, which was regarded as a marvel of weapon technology at the time. Capable of firing at a staggering rate of approximately 1,200 rounds per minute, The MG-42 was the backbone of the German squad's firepower. The rifleman's primary role was to protect and support the machine gun with their own weapons, mainly the KR-98K, serving as secondary arms, used mainly for precision shooting and self-defense as circumstances demanded. These tactical arrangements had served the Germans well across Europe, from the streets of Warsaw in Paris to the very gates of Moscow. But the advent of American innovation in infantry warfare was rewriting the very rules of engagement. Every American infantryman was issued a semi-automatic rifle capable of firing 8 rounds as swiftly as he could pull the trigger, then reloading in under 3 seconds with a fresh end-block clip. This revolution allowed for an entirely different style of combat, one that emphasized rapid fire, mobility, and sustained assault, unlike the slow, deliberate shot and reload rhythm of the bolt-action rifle. While a typical German squad consisted of 1 machine gun and 9 riflemen, that of the Americans comprised 1 machine gun, 1 automatic rifle, and 11 semi-automatic rifles. A clear disparity in firepower and tactical flexibility. This overwhelming advantage began to manifest during engagements in North Africa in 1943. Although many German soldiers initially dismissed these reports as exaggerated or perhaps the product of Allied propaganda. In the aftermath of combat at the Kasserine Pass, German officers sent detailed reports back to their command in Berlin, noting that American forces seemed to possess semi-automatic rifles in large, possibly unprecedented quantities. However, the German High Command demonstrated a fundamental failure to comprehend the scope of American industrial capacity. They skeptically considered the possibility that these weapons might be automatic firearms or Thompson submachine guns, but they dismissed the idea that semi-automatic rifles could be produced in such vast numbers given the technological and manufacturing constraints of the United States. They were gravely mistaken. By February of 1943, Springfield Armory and Winchester Repeating Arms, 2 of America's most prolific weapons manufacturers, were producing more than 4,000 M1 Garand rifles each day. As the months progressed, American industry scaled up production with remarkable efficiency. By the time during the early stages of the conflict, American manufacturing capabilities for semi-automatic rifles were still largely in the experimental phase, producing only small quantities rather than large-scale supplies. According to United States Army records from the North African campaign, German prisoners of war were reportedly quite incredulous when shown the official supply figures for American weapons, especially semi-automatic rifles. One captured German report, preserved in the National Archives of the United States and originating from Tunisia, explicitly stated that American infantry units seemed to be equipped as a standard, routine matter with semi-automatic firearms. However, verifying this claim was virtually impossible, as doing so would require a level of industrial capacity and mass production that Germany's wartime resources could hardly match or estimate reliably. This observation was made specifically on June the 6th in the year of 1944, precisely at the infamous Omaha Beach landing. At that time, the German 352nd Infantry Division was tasked with defending territory overlooking what was known as the Easy Red Sector. Post-engagement German military records, once the beachhead was secured, vividly described the overwhelming volume of American rifle fire encountered during the assault. One particular after-action report from the Germans remarked on the relentless, continuous rifle fire maintained by American infantry as they advanced, with no observable pauses for bolt-action manipulation. The report further noted that the intensity and volume of fire from American units exceeded that from the German machine gun nests, highlighting a critical disparity in firepower. This disparity became even more apparent during the fierce clashes immediately after the initial landings, when the fighting broke into close-quarters combat within confined terrain close to the beach, such as the hedgerows of Normandy's Bocage country. In these tight, restricted environments, engagement distances rarely exceeded 100 meters, rendering traditional German doctrine of long-range accuracy and marksmanship largely irrelevant. Instead, the key to success was the rapid delivery of a high volume of precise, controlled fire, something that semi-automatic rifles made significantly more effective compared to bolt-action weapons. A German training manual from the 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division, dated July, the same year as the D-Day landings, acknowledged the American advantage in weapon technology. The manual noted that American rifle squads produced firepower on par with German machine gun positions, making conventional suppression tactics ineffective against units armed with semi-automatic rifles. German ordnance officers who had examined captured M1 Garand rifles were astounded by the manufacturing quality and precision achievable at the large scale of American production. The M1 Garand operated using a gas system, utilizing the expanding gases from each fired cartridge to automatically cycle the action. Its clip system allowed quick reloading, taking only seconds to replenish the magazine. Most remarkably, these rifles were manufactured to extraordinarily tight tolerances that German industry simply could not reproduce on the same scale. A military intelligence report from August of the year 1944, now preserved in British military archives, vividly captured this reality. It stated that the M1 rifle exemplified mass production techniques that the Germans could neither match nor replicate. The report emphasized that the individual components showed precise tolerances maintained across thousands of units. The parts were fully interchangeable, with any component fitting perfectly into any other rifle and functioning flawlessly. In contrast, the German G43 rifle was developed as their answer to the American M1 Garand. Despite its innovative design, German wartime production figures tell a starkly different story. While every American infantryman was issued an M1 rifle, more than 5,400,000 of them throughout the war, the G43 was primarily limited to snipers and specialized troops due to production limitations. In total, German manufacturing output of the G43 during the entire conflict amounted to just over 42,700 rifles. This is in stark comparison to the colossal number of M1s, over 5,400,000, that were produced and widely issued to American troops. The significance of this firepower imbalance was dramatically demonstrated during the Battle of the Bulge, which occurred in the winter of 1944 to 1945. German forces achieved tactical surprise, attacking with overwhelming numerical superiority in many sectors. Despite this, smaller American units, even when outnumbered and attempting to hold their positions while surrounded, managed to do so thanks to their superior firepower, most notably their semi-automatic rifles, which allowed for rapid, sustained fire without the need for manual bolt actions after every shot. On December the 17th in the year of 1944, at a key location known as Elsenborn Ridge, the fighting reached a peak. During this fierce engagement, American soldiers demonstrated how their improved weaponry could turn the tide against a numerically superior enemy. Official combat interviews and reports from that period provide detailed insights into how the firepower advantage of the American forces, rooted heavily in the widespread use of the M1 Garand rifle, played a decisive role in stalling and reversing German advances during this critical phase of the campaign. Immediately following the decisive engagements of the battle, military records, carefully preserved within the archives, reveal first-hand accounts of the experiences faced by the brave soldiers of the 99th Infantry Division. Despite being vastly outnumbered, sometimes by 3 times their foe, the division's soldiers managed to hold their positions predominantly by sheer volume of rifle fire. One infantry sergeant vividly recounted, "All we did was keep firing, 8 rounds, then a quick reload, and 8 more. Our relentless fire was like a wall, preventing the Germans from advancing. Their attempts to break through were met with a continuous, overwhelming barrage of lead." As a result, German casualties during the first week of the offensive surpassed all initial planning estimates, reflecting the fierce resistance put up by the American troops. Furthermore, a captured operational directive from the 20th SS Panzer Division shed light on the effectiveness of American small arms fire. The order explicitly stated that United States small arms fire severely hampers movement, even in the face of numerical superiority, emphasizing the strategic importance of sustained rifle fire. It mandated that each enemy position be regarded as a potential automatic weapon emplacement, underscoring the lethal efficiency of American infantry tactics. The numerical data told an irrefutable story. By December of the year 1944, American industry had manufactured over 4 million M1 Garand rifles. This staggering production figure underscored the scale of the war effort and the importance placed on ensuring every infantryman was equipped with this formidable weapon. In January of 1944, the Springfield Armory reached its peak production output, churning out an extraordinary 122 1001 rifles in that single month. To put that in perspective, this meant an average of 3,936 rifles produced each day, or around 164 rifles every hour around the clock. This relentless manufacturing pace exemplified America's industrial mobilization at its peak during the war years. The workforce at Springfield Armory itself reflected this national effort. By June of 1943, women made up 43% of the total employment, with a workforce of 12,955 personnel, of whom 5,210 were women. Many of these women, many with no prior experience in manufacturing, played a vital role in producing weapons that often exceeded German quality standards, showcasing the high level of American craftsmanship. The weapon production efforts extended beyond Springfield. The Winchester Repeating Arms Company contributed over 500,000 rifles, specifically 513,880 rifles, to the war effort. Meanwhile, the International Harvester Company, primarily known for their agricultural machinery, successfully retooled their facilities to produce 337,623 M1 Garands. Harrington and Richardson, another prominent manufacturer, added 428,600 rifles during the war and immediately afterward. Such wide distribution of manufacturing capabilities ensured that no single enemy bombing raid could cripple American rifle production, securing the continuous supply of these vital weapons. The advent and widespread deployment of the M1 Garand transformed the very tactics of infantry combat. Unlike previous bolt-action rifles, the semi-automatic M1 allowed American squads to execute marching fire assaults, advancing across the battlefield while maintaining a steady volume of aim fire. Archival military training films from 1943 vividly depict these tactics, showing soldiers advancing in coordinated bounds. Each soldier, trained to deliver 8 well-aimed shots while in motion, dramatically increased their firepower and battlefield effectiveness. German tactics, as codified in their 1943 infantry manual, relied heavily on bolt-action rifles, with close calculations for suppressive fire, ammunition consumption, and assault strategies based on the slower rate of fire they expected. In stark contrast, American soldiers consistently exceeded these calculations, firing at a rate roughly 3 times faster. The United States Army's Field Manual 710, titled Infantry Rifle Company, published in 1944, centered its entire tactical doctrine around the semi-automatic firepower of the M1 rifle. The manual emphasized that the success of rapid, sustained fire from rifle squads was crucial to modern infantry operations. It acknowledged that the semi-automatic rifle was only effective when supported by a reliable and plentiful supply of ammunition, making industrial-scale production and supply chain management critical. American industry responded remarkably. The Lake City Army Ammunition Plant, situated in Missouri and sprawling across approximately 3,900 acres, produced billions of rounds during the war years. Although precise figures for .30-06 ammunition are unavailable, the total ammunition output reached an astounding 7 billion rounds, enough to sustain the unprecedented volume of fire needed in modern combat. In summary, the combination of prolific manufacturing, innovative tactics, and industrial resilience formed the backbone of America's infantry firepower during the conflict. The widespread production of the M1 Garand, supported by an unyielding supply of ammunition, fundamentally reshaped infantry combat, allowing American soldiers to maintain continuous fire superiority and execute more aggressive, coordinated advances than ever before. Such efforts and innovations solidified the United States' position on the battlefield. During the height of World War II, detailed records from the Wehrmacht's logistical system reveal that each rifleman was typically supplied with around 60 rounds of ammunition for offensive operations. This allocation was carefully documented in their supply logs, reflecting the standard provisioning for infantry units expecting to engage in combat. Conversely, American soldiers carried a considerably higher basic load, often equipping themselves with 80 rounds loaded into en-bloc clips, a method that allowed for swift reloading and was supported by a vast and well-organized logistical network. These supplies could be replenished ad infinitum, thanks to the enormous industrial capacity supporting the American war effort, providing troops with continual access to ammunition during even the most prolonged campaigns. This standard was typical by the beginning of January of the year 1945. At this point, the German offensive had lost its initial momentum, and American forces launched a counterattack amidst the bitter cold of the winter season. Conditions on the battlefield, characterized by freezing temperatures and icy winds, should have posed significant advantages to the defending German troops, who were better suited to static positions. Yet in an unexpected turn, winter revealed another significant advantage of the American M1 Garand rifle. Harsh weather conditions had a tangible negative impact on the operation of the bolt-action rifles possessed by German soldiers. In particular, the freezing cold severely hampered the manual operation of bolt mechanisms. Soldiers' hands, numb from the cold, struggled to manipulate the bolts with precision. Moreover, the thickening of lubricants and oils used in firearm maintenance caused the mechanical parts to stiffen, thereby reducing the rifle's reliability and speed. In contrast, the semi-automatic design of the M1 Garand allowed American infantrymen to fire repeatedly by simply pulling the trigger, an advantage that was particularly valuable when wearing heavy winter gloves. The rapid and consistent ability to fire without having to manually cycle the bolt proved decisive in these conditions. Loading the end block clips, which could be inserted quickly and efficiently even when fingers were numb, was a simple matter for American soldiers. Meanwhile, German troops had to load each round individually into their Karabiner 98K rifles, a time-consuming and more difficult task under freezing conditions. Records kept by the U.S. Army Medical Corps from the Battle of the Bulge explicitly note that American riflemen suffered significantly fewer frostbite injuries compared to their German counterparts. This discrepancy was partly because American soldiers, thanks to their semi-automatic rifles and loading procedures, were less exposed to the elements during their reloading and firing routines, thus reducing their risk of cold-related injuries. Fast forward to March of 1945, when American forces were preparing to cross the Rhine River, projecting an impending offensive against the heavily armed German defenders. The Germans had developed defensive plans based on traditional military calculations, which assumed that each defender could hold off roughly 3 attackers. This ratio, rooted in centuries of military doctrine dating back to Napoleon, relied on the premise of equal firepower exchange rates. However, the extraordinary firepower of the American soldiers wielding the M1 Garand disrupted this conventional calculus. American infantry, equipped with the M1 Garand rifles, could produce a firing rate 3 times higher than that of German defenders armed with bolt-action rifles. This massive disparity in volume of fire rendered the classic formulas for defense inadequate. The actual crossing of the Rhine demonstrated that the Germans' expected casualties and defensive effectiveness were overestimated. The successful crossings resulted in fewer casualties than anticipated by Allied planners, primarily because the overwhelming volume of small arms fire from American troops suppressed German positions more effectively than traditional defensive strategies had predicted. The story of the M1 Garand was inextricably linked to America's extensive industrial mobilization and technological innovation during the war years. Springfield Armory in Massachusetts, initially a modest government armory, transformed into a sprawling, highly efficient production complex capable of mass manufacturing the rifle. The main factory building alone extended over a mile in length, symbolizing the vast scale of wartime production. Each M1 Garand rifle underwent a rigorous manufacturing process involving approximately 1,000 distinct operations, executed by highly specialized machinery. This level of precision and efficiency enabled American industry to meet the immense demand with remarkable speed. The evolution of production efficiency was dramatic. In 1940, producing a single Garand required about 117 man-hours of labor. By 1943, this had been reduced to roughly 75 man-hours, and by 1945, the figure had plummeted to approximately 31 man-hours per rifle. As a result, the cost per rifle also dropped significantly, from around $83 at the start of the war to merely $31 by the war's end. The workforce that operated this massive manufacturing machine saw considerable change as well. The percentage of women workers who had stepped into the labor force in large numbers increased from 20% in June of 1942 to 43% a year later. These women employees were quickly trained in just weeks rather than years, operating complex machinery with a level of skill that ensured every component was manufactured to exact standards, producing parts. Despite its imperfections and the inherent challenges in mastering a new technique, even a nervous soldier was still capable of delivering fire with substantial effectiveness when armed with the right weapon. During the period leading up to and including World War II, the United States Army at Fort Benning, Georgia, undertook a significant overhaul of its infantry training methodology, primarily centered around the revolutionary capabilities of the M1 Garand semi-automatic rifle. This firearm fundamentally changed how soldiers could engage the enemy, and the results of this shift were remarkably evident in recruit qualification metrics. Official training reports from the year 1943 clearly document a dramatic leap in rifle marksmanship scores among new soldiers following the adoption of semi-automatic rifles. Specifically, the proportion of recruits earning the expert rifle qualification, a benchmark of exceptional proficiency, rose by a staggering 40% in comparison to the figures recorded prior to the introduction of the M1 Garand, which was based on the older bolt-action rifle training. Such a significant improvement underscored the weapon's impact not only on individual skill levels, but also on overall combat readiness. This educational success set the stage for the battlefield demonstrations to come. Even before the actual D-Day invasion, the effectiveness of the M1 Garand was showcased vividly in the Italian campaign, particularly during battles from January to May of 1944 at Monte Cassino. During this campaign, the American infantry divisions, notably the 34th, 36th, and 45th, faced seasoned German paratroopers entrenched in the rugged mountain terrain, an environment where doctrine traditionally emphasized the importance of long-range precision fire achievable through bolt-action rifles. Such weapons were presumed to hold an advantage in mountainous combat, where accurate shots at extended distances could decisively influence engagements. Contrary to these expectations, the American soldiers found that in mountain combat, the sheer volume of fire, delivered rapidly and in continuous bursts, often proved more impactful than precise shots. Being able to quickly engage multiple targets while maneuvering on steep slopes became a decisive factor, enabling the American troops to dominate the battlefield despite the terrain's difficulties. While the detailed records of M1 Garand usage at Monte Cassino are somewhat limited, the fact remains that these divisions were systematically equipped with the Garand as their standard issue rifle, in accordance with their organizational tables, and it was considered integral to their operational effectiveness. In stark contrast to the American experience, German attempts to develop an equivalent semi-automatic rifle to rival the Garand were entirely unsuccessful. The German effort culminated in the G43 rifle, which was intended to serve as their semi-automatic service firearm. Unfortunately, the G43 was plagued by numerous problems, chief among them being its unreliable performance and limited production capacity. Official production figures verified that only a little over 42,713 G43 rifles were manufactured throughout the war, a figure that constituted less than 10% of the units produced in America for the M1 Garand. The G43 was also labor-intensive to assemble, requiring extensive hand-fitting of its components, an arduous process under the stress and resource limitations of late-war Germany. Maintaining these rifles proved to be a logistical nightmare, as each unit needed skilled armorers familiar with their specific assembly to keep them operational. Reports from German ordnance sources indicated that the rifles frequently malfunctioned, and when they did, they often rendered the weapon unusable rather than as a reliable combat tool, effectively turning what should have been a decisive advantage into an expensive and inefficient club. The assessments of German military technical experts, analyzed and captured by Allied forces, consistently branded the G43 as inferior when compared to the American M1 Garand in the essential triad of reliability, accuracy, and ease of maintenance. These technical shortcomings meant that German soldiers, when forced to choose between their own semi-automatic rifles or enemy weapons, often opted to fire captured M1 Garands, despite explicit regulations forbidding the use of enemy equipment. This preference highlights the undeniable superiority of the American rifle in practical battlefield conditions. Additional intelligence from the Pacific Theater further reinforced the perception that the U.S. Army's firepower was far superior to that of the Germans. Based on intercepted communications and reports, German staff officers learned that Japanese forces, who fought with tactics similar to those of the Germans and were armed predominantly with bolt-action Arisaka rifles, were systematically being overwhelmed and destroyed by units equipped with M1 Garands. The M1's rapid-firing capability allowed American troops to deliver a suppressive and lethal volume of fire against the often fanatical defenders, regardless of the rugged terrain. The decisive nature of this firepower was exemplified in the Battle of Aniwa, which took place from February to March of 1945. This engagement coincided with the Rhine crossings, an operation demonstrating that American soldiers could successfully confront determined adversaries even in the most challenging environments by leveraging their superior individual firepower. The results were clear. American infantrymen could, through their enhanced volume of fire, break the morale and suppress the resistance of heavily entrenched and seemingly fanatical enemies. When these reports circulated in his post-war memoirs, Albert Kessler, who was in command of German forces stationed in Italy during World War II, reflected on the impact of American infantry weaponry and recognized a fundamental shift in battlefield dynamics. He stated that the American soldiers, equipped with semi-automatic rifles, possessed a level of firepower that the Germans could never effectively counter. The crucial advantage lay not merely in firepower, but in the rate of sustained firing. The American infantrymen could unleash 8 shots for every single shot the poorly equipped German soldier could manage. This significant disparity rendered traditional tactics, which relied on suppression fire and deliberate movement, largely ineffective when faced with such rapid and sustained rates of fire. Furthermore, the German commander Hasso von Montiel, who commanded forces during the pivotal Battle of the Bulge, provided a stark testimony during his interrogation, bolstering this perspective. He emphasized that the semi-automatic rifle gave the American troops an overwhelming tactical edge. To exploit such an advantage fully, the Germans needed to suppress enemy fire effectively. But with bolt-action rifles, standard issue for German infantry, they simply lacked the volume of suppressive fire necessary to advance or maneuver securely. The stark contrast in production numbers vividly illustrates this disparity, underscoring the extent of the technological superiority of the American semi-automatic rifle over German weaponry. Official production records confirm that the United States manufactured an astonishing number of M1 Garand rifles during the war, specifically over 4,188,669 units through the Springfield Armory, over 513,800 just at Winchester, and an additional 337,623 from International Harvester, culminating in a total of approximately 5,468,772 rifles. In comparison, German production of semi-automatic rifles, primarily the G43, was verified at around 42,713 units across all variants, a production volume that was roughly 13.5 times less than the American output. This ratio increased further when considering the entire spectrum of American Garand rifles. In fact, the U.S. produced around 6 times as many as the Germans. During the peak of American manufacturing efforts in January of 1944, the Springfield Armory alone was capable of turning out nearly 4,936 M1 Garands per day, a production rate that exemplified the scale and efficiency of the American industrial war machine. This immense manufacturing capacity required a sophisticated logistical network to support it, one capable of not only producing rifles, but also supplying ammunition, spare parts, and overhaul services. By the year of 1945, American supply lines were delivering approximately 20 million rounds of ammunition every single day to Allied forces across Europe. Additionally, the U.S. maintained a stockpile of spare parts sufficient to sustain 3 million rifles and had established comprehensive depot-level overhaul capabilities, ensuring that the weapons remained operational and reliable throughout the campaign. In stark contrast, German logistical efforts struggled to meet even basic supply requirements. Documentation from the German Wehrmacht's quartermaster records reveals that the logistics system was ill-equipped to deliver the necessary ammunition and supplies to their frontline troops. The standard ammunition allocation for each German soldier engaged in offensive operations was roughly 60 rounds. significantly less than the American basic load of 80 rounds, which was further supported by the vital advantage of an unlimited resupply capability in the American system. This disparity in resupply and logistics was a crucial factor contributing to their operational limitations on the battlefield. Beyond the logistical and tactical considerations, the economic dimension also played a decisive role in determining the outcome of these technological battles. By 1945, the cost per American M1 Garand had been reduced to approximately $31, an impressive decrease from the initial price of $83 at the start of the war. This cost reduction was primarily the result of production innovations in economies of scale achieved through mass manufacturing. Conversely, the German G43 rifle, which was their semi-automatic firearm of choice, cost about 350 Reichsmarks per unit, an amount nearly 4 times higher when adjusted for the relative purchasing power of their economy. Despite its higher cost, the G43 was less reliable and more challenging to maintain, factors that further hampered German logistical efficiency. American firearms manufacturing was revolutionized by employing specialized machinery that, although requiring a substantial initial investment, dramatically lowered the cost per rifle once in production. This approach enabled the United States to produce rifles on an enormous scale, achieving economies of scale that German factories, which were frequently bombed and repeatedly relocated, could not match. These disruptions prevented the Germans from establishing a comparable level of mass production efficiency, thereby limiting their ability to equip their troops with modern, reliable semi-automatic rifles comparable to the M1 Garand. The extensive documentation preserved within the archives of the United States National Records vividly illustrates how profoundly American firepower affected German perceptions of the battlefield. Interrogation reports from captured German soldiers and officers consistently conveyed astonishment at the capabilities of American small arms. One particularly illustrative document is a German training circular. In my personal view, the M1 rifle stands out as arguably the most formidable and innovative combat weapon ever conceived by military engineers. This assertion follows extensive observation of its performance during the intense and grueling European campaigns of the Second World War. General George S. Patton, a legendary figure in American military history, recognized that victory on the battlefield was achieved not solely through the gallantry of individual soldiers, but through the deployment of superior firepower. Firepower provided by the collective efforts of ordinary troops wielding extraordinary weapons. The rapid advances made by Patton's Third Army can be partially attributed to the infantry unit's ability to deliver concentrated, overwhelming firepower without relying heavily on machine gun support units. This tactical advantage was made possible by the meticulous and innovative design of the rifle that every soldier carried. The creator of this revolutionary firearm was John C. Garand, a Canadian-born American engineer whose work transcended mere firearm design to become a symbol of industrial ingenuity. Originally born Jantius Garand, he began his development efforts at Springfield Armory shortly after the First World War in 1919. Garand's design reached its final form in the early 30s, culminating in a prototype that was officially adopted by the United States military on January 9, 1936. This rifle was meticulously optimized for mass production, allowing semi-skilled workers to manufacture it efficiently and in vast quantities. Remarkably, Garand transferred all patent rights to the U.S. government, choosing not to accept any royalties despite the fact that millions of these rifles were subsequently produced and issued to American soldiers. His guiding principles centered around simplicity, reliability, and ease of manufacture, values that embodied the core principles of American industrial strength and innovation. The M1 Garand was more than just a firearm, it was a tangible reflection of American societal ideals, manifesting the country's commitment to mass production and democratized access to superior military technology. Unlike the more hierarchical and specialized approach favored by German military doctrine, where elite units wielded distinct, specialized weaponry, the American strategy aimed at equipping every infantryman with the best possible firepower. This mass deployment of advanced weaponry was not merely a military choice, but a societal one, emphasizing equality of capability among soldiers and highlighting America's industrial capacity as a form of national strength. The rifle that played a pivotal role in securing victory during World War II was produced by a diverse workforce that included housewives and teenagers, carried into battle by everyday citizens, and supplied through an extensive system of factories and arsenals, an embodiment of a nation's belief that its industrial prowess equated to military might. The superiority of the M1 Garand had implications that extended beyond individual firefights. It enabled American commanders to plan operations with confidence, secure in the knowledge that their infantry units possessed significant inherent firepower advantages over their adversaries. In contrast, German commanders found themselves at a strategic disadvantage, often having to compensate for being outgunned at the most fundamental level. This disparity influenced all levels of combat, from small-scale patrols to large-scale offensives. American small units could operate with a surprising degree of independence, assured by their firepower superiority, whereas German units frequently depended on machine gun support to carry out offensive maneuvers, which limited tactical flexibility and increased vulnerability. Military historians frequently cite the M1 Garand as a decisive factor in the Allied victory. In his book, The Sharp End of War, Dr. John Ellis analyzed the impact of American infantry firepower, estimating that it contributed to a roughly 40% reduction in casualties compared to forces equipped with bolt-action rifles. The formal history of the United States Army in World War II confirms that the semi-automatic nature of the M1 Garand gave American soldiers a significant tactical advantage, a margin of superiority that became evident across all theaters of combat. Today, the M1 Garand remains an iconic symbol of American military achievement, its image preserved in museums and historical displays worldwide as the weapon that helped secure victory in the most widespread and devastating conflict humanity has known. For German veterans who faced its relentless firepower firsthand, the rifle came to symbolize the overwhelming industrial and technological prowess of the United States, a creation that demonstrated, with undeniable mathematical certainty, that superior firepower could tip the scales of war. This rifle did more than just win gunfights. It embodied the very essence of American industrial strength and ingenuity, providing an enduring reminder that well-designed, mass-produced weapons could change the course of history and reshape our understanding of what a soldier could achieve on the battlefield. During the tumultuous years of the early 20th century, it became increasingly evident that the power of modern democratic militaries, rooted in the principles of industrial democracy, could surpass and even outmatch the aggressive forces of totalitarian regimes armed with relentless militarism. The revolutionary influence of the M1 Garand rifle served as a striking testament to this truth. Its superiority in combat was reaffirmed vividly during the Korean War, which raged from 1950 to 1953, a conflict characterized by human wave attacks launched by communist forces desperate to overwhelm their opponents. The United Nations forces equipped with M1 Garands possessed a significant tactical advantage. Their rifles' ability to deliver sustained semi-automatic fire allowed small units to generate enough firepower to halt even the most desperate assaults that would have otherwise decimated units armed solely with traditional bolt-action rifles. This capability was not just a minor technical detail, it fundamentally shifted the strategic landscape of infantry warfare. When West Germany undertook the rebuilding of its military forces in the 1950s, an effort officially known as the Bundeswehr, they made a decisive choice to incorporate semi-automatic rifles into their standard armament almost immediately. This decision was driven by a hard-earned lesson from the crucible of World War II, particularly from the brutal campaigns of 1944 and 1945. The Germans recognized that the old reliance on bolt-action rifles was no longer viable in modern combat, where rapid, sustained fire could mean the difference between victory and defeat. No military in the modern era would ever again equip its infantry primarily with bolt-action rifles. The legacy of the M1 Garand's success is evident in virtually every subsequent assault rifle design. It became the blueprint for modern infantry weaponry. The principle of equipping each soldier with a semi-automatic rifle capable of providing continuous fire was no longer just innovative. It became a cornerstone of military doctrine worldwide. This technological and tactical evolution was influenced by the development of the Sturmgewehr 44 in Germany, which was conceived as a response to the formidable presence of the M1 Garand on the battlefield. The Sturmgewehr's design philosophy and combat performance profoundly impacted subsequent firearm development, most notably inspiring the Soviet Union's revolutionary AK-47. In turn, the AK-47 influenced countless other infantry weapons across the globe. The M1 Garand did more than merely secure victory in a specific conflict. It fundamentally transformed the nature of warfare itself. It demonstrated convincingly that the firepower wielded at the level of the individual soldier could be as decisive as artillery barrages or armored divisions, influencing military tactics in strategic planning for generations. The M1 Garand was also a product of American industrial philosophy, an ethos rooted in mass production rather than artisanal craftsmanship. Its design was meticulously engineered for efficient manufacturing, allowing each component to be produced by specialized machinery operated by relatively unskilled workers. This approach proved extraordinarily effective, setting the standard for global manufacturing for decades following the Second World War. In contrast, German wartime philosophy prioritized the craftsmanship of highly skilled artisans, producing complex weapons in limited quantities. The German G43 rifle serves as a stark example of this approach, which ultimately proved to be a flawed strategy. Its technical shortcomings were compounded by an incompatible industrial system incapable of supporting its production demands, hampering Germany's military capacity at a critical moment. The success of the M1 Garand extended beyond mere battlefield performance. It became a symbol of victory for a democratic society that harnessed its industrial and organizational strengths to defeat totalitarian militarism. The rifle's mass production and widespread availability illustrated a fundamental truth. A society based on free labor and democratic principles could, through superior organization and technological innovation, outproduce and outfight an enemy built upon forced labor and oppressive control. Every M1 Garand that fired in combat bore witness to this ideological victory. It was tangible evidence that a free people, working collectively within the framework of democracy, could outperform and outproduce a regime driven by slave labor and tyranny. To the German soldiers who faced the relentless firepower of the M1, the lesson was clear and harsh. They were confronting not just a different type of weapon, but an entirely different paradigm of warfare, one driven by innovation, organization, and the power of free enterprise. This realization struck both physically and psychologically. German units discovered they had become outdated, not merely in tactics, but in technology and industrial capacity. The defeat in May of 1945 was as much a technological and industrial defeat as it was a military one. The iconic M1 Garand came to symbolize this comprehensive loss, an emblem of the failure of totalitarian militarism to keep pace with the efficiencies of democratic industrialized warfare. The weapon itself, a mass-produced marvel, exemplified the triumph of the efficiency-oriented American manufacturing model over the more labor-intensive, craftsmanship-focused German approach. Outfitted with citizen soldiers, the American troops wielded the M1 with lethal effectiveness, outmatching German professionals in the very act of combat. The mathematics of this technological and the M1 Garand revolutionized warfare by providing American troops with unparalleled firepower, establishing a clear advantage over their adversaries. Unlike the German soldiers armed with the Carabine Model 98K rifles, which consistently left them outmatched in every encounter, the American infantry relied on a weapon that fundamentally changed the nature of combat. The M1 Garand was exactly what General Patton famously lauded as the most effective tactical tool ever created, an assertion that held true in the heat of battle. Its victory was not rooted in finesse or surgical precision, but was driven instead by sheer, overwhelming firepower, a force multiplier delivered relentlessly by millions of rifles, mass-produced through what he called the arsenal of democracy. For the German soldiers who encountered it on the battlefield, the M1 Garand represented far more than a mere military superiority. It served as a stark affirmation that their deeply held beliefs in racial supremacy, long-standing military traditions, and the indomitable warrior spirit were fundamentally flawed. The weapon's widespread deployment demonstrated that industrial capacity, combined with democratic principles of production and the spirit of citizen soldiers could decisively topple even the most seasoned professional military forces in the world. The rifle that played a crucial role in securing victory during the war did so by illustrating a larger truth, that free societies, through organized, efficient industrial efforts, were more capable of innovating, producing, and fighting effectively than authoritarian regimes built solely on rigid control and tradition. With its iconic 8-round clips and semi-automatic firing capability, the M1 Garand embodied the ideals of democracy in action, proving its superiority over the fascist regimes of Nazi Germany. The German soldiers, who found themselves irritated by the distinctive ping of the rifle's ejecting clip after each shot, were in reality acknowledging a profound truth. Their frustration was not just with an inconvenience, but was a recognition that they had misunderstood the nature of the conflict they faced. They had challenged a different enemy, an enemy rooted in industrial might and democratic resilience, armed with weapons and strategies based on flawed assumptions. The M1 Garand, through its effective performance in countless firefights, proved the lesson that modern warfare was no longer solely a contest of individual heroism or tradition. It was fundamentally a contest of industry and innovation. Ultimately, the greatest triumph of the M1 Garand lay in its demonstration that a democratic nation's industrial capacity could overwhelm any military adversary, no matter how professional, motivated, or ideologically committed they might be. The very sound of an ejecting clip, once hated by German troops, symbolized their failure to grasp the larger reality, that they were fighting not just an army, but the machinery of democracy itself. Today, the M1 Garand remains preserved in military museums and private collections across the globe, a testament to its enduring significance. Remarkably, after more than 80 years, the rifle still functions flawlessly, its revolutionary design inspiring admiration among military enthusiasts and historians alike. It stands as a powerful symbol of American ingenuity, industrial strength, and the democratic principle that access to the best equipment should not be limited to elites, but should be available to every soldier defending the values of liberty and justice. To those who had the fortune or misfortune to face it in combat, the M1 Garand was unforgettable, the weapon that transformed average citizen soldiers into formidable warriors through superior mechanical advantage. By showcasing that technological innovation and mass production could determine the outcome of war, the M1 Garand proved that victory depends less on ideology or family tradition and more on the power of modern industry. Its reputation as the greatest battle implement ever devised was earned on countless fields of combat, carried into battle by soldiers who understood they held in their hands the answer to tyranny. The M1 Garand remains a testament to the enduring strength of democratic ideals, forever cemented in history as a weapon that changed the course of warfare.